Derek had been dreaming about this moment for 7 long years. 7 years of working double shifts, skipping vacations, and eating ramen noodles more times than he cared to admit. But today, all of that sacrifice finally meant something. He was sitting behind the wheel of a brand new Rolls-Royce Phantom, and it was actually his. The midnight blue paint gleamed under the dealership lights as he signed the final papers. His hand shook a little as he wrote his signature. The salesman smiled and handed him the keys, and Derek had to remind himself to breathe. This wasn't just any car. This was the car he'd stared at in magazines since he was a kid, growing up in a neighborhood where luxury meant having a car that actually started every morning. At 34 years old, Derek had built his tech consulting business from nothing. He'd taught himself coding in the public library, landed his first client through pure determination, and slowly built a reputation for solving problems other people couldn't fix. The money came gradually, then all at once. But he never forgot where he came from, and he never stopped working hard. As he drove home that evening, Derek couldn't stop grinning. The car handled like a dream, smooth and powerful. He'd worked for this. Every single hour of overtime, every weekend he'd missed hanging out with friends, every time he told himself just a little longer when things got tough. This wasn't luck. This wasn't a gift. He'd earned every inch of this car. The Riverside Meadows community looked peaceful as he pulled in through the main gate. Derek had moved into his townhouse about 2 years ago. It was a nice place, quiet, with well-maintained lawns and a pool he barely had time to use. The HOA fees were a bit steep, but the location was perfect for his work, and most of his neighbors seemed friendly enough. He carefully navigated to his assigned parking spot, taking extra care not to get too close to the cars on either side. The last thing he needed was a scratch on day one. After turning off the engine, he just sat there for a moment, running his hands over the leather steering wheel. His phone buzzed with congratulations text from his mom, his sister, and a few close friends who knew what this purchase meant to him. Derek climbed out, locked the door, and took one more long look at his new car before heading to his unit. The evening sun made the blue paint look almost purple, and he pulled out his phone to snap a quick picture. His mom was going to be so proud. She'd been the one who told him he could do anything if he worked hard enough, even when they were struggling to pay the electric bill. What Derek didn't notice as he walked away was the woman watching from a second-floor window in Unit 42. Linda Hutchins had lived in Riverside Meadows for 15 years and had been the HOA president for the last 8. She considered herself the guardian of the community's standards, and right now, her eyes were locked on that Rolls-Royce with an expression that would have made Derek very uncomfortable if he'd seen it. Linda's mind was racing. She knew everyone in this community, or at least she thought she did. Derek was relatively new, kept to himself mostly, left early for work, and came home late. She'd never paid much attention to him before. He seemed quiet, polite when they passed in the hallway, always nodded hello. But this car changed everything. Where would someone like him get the money for a car like that? The question gnawed at her. She'd been driving the same Mercedes for 10 years, and her husband had a decent job as a regional manager. They were comfortable, respectable. But a Rolls-Royce? That was a different level entirely. Something didn't add up in her mind. She pulled out her phone and started typing in the HOA group chat, then stopped. No, she needed more information first. Linda prided herself on being thorough. She walked to her bookshelf and pulled out the community directory, flipping to Derek's information. Tech consultant, it said. She frowned. That could mean anything. That could mean nothing. Over the next hour, Linda found herself repeatedly walking past her window, glancing down at the parking lot where the Rolls-Royce sat. Each time she looked, her suspicion grew. She started making assumptions, building a narrative in her head. Nobody she knew in tech consulting made that kind of money, especially not someone as young as Derek appeared to be. Her husband, Richard, came home to find her still at the window. "What are you looking at?" he asked, loosening his tie. "That car," Linda said, pointing. "The blue Rolls-Royce. It belongs to that young man in Unit 28. Derek something." Richard glanced out the window and shrugged. "Nice car. Good for him. Good for him." Linda turned to face her husband. "Richard, think about it. Where would he get that kind of money? I'm going to need to look into this." "Linda, please don't start," Richard sighed. "The man bought a car. It's not our business," but Linda wasn't listening anymore. In her mind, she'd already decided something wasn't right. She'd spent years managing this community, keeping out problems, maintaining standards. She wasn't about to let anything or anyone threaten the neighborhood she'd worked so hard to protect. That night, Derek slept peacefully, dreaming about weekend drives in his new car. He had no idea that just a few buildings away, someone was already planning to make his life difficult. He had no idea that his dream car was about to become the center of a nightmare. The next morning, Derek woke up early, excited to drive his Rolls-Royce to a client meeting. He'd scheduled an earlier start just so he could enjoy the drive. He showered, got dressed in his best suit, and grabbed his laptop bag. As he walked to the parking lot, he noticed a few neighbors staring, and he smiled and waved. Some waved back. Others just looked away quickly. He didn't think much of it. People probably weren't used to seeing a car like this in the neighborhood. He clicked the key fob and the Rolls-Royce's lights blinked in welcome. Derek opened the door, settled into the driver's seat, and took a deep breath. Day 2 of ownership, and the excitement hadn't worn off one bit. As he backed out of his spot, he caught a glimpse of that same woman from Unit 42 standing near the mailboxes, her arms crossed, watching him intently. Their eyes met for just a second, and something about her expression made him uneasy. But he shook it off, gave a polite nod, and drove toward the gate. Derek had no way of knowing that Linda had already taken 3 photos of his car, his license plate, and him getting into the vehicle. He had no way of knowing she'd already started a file, and he definitely had no way of knowing that by this time tomorrow, his entire life was about to be turned upside down. Derek's peaceful morning was shattered by the sound of someone pounding on his door, like they were trying to break it down. He glanced at his phone. 6:30 in the morning on a Saturday. He'd finally taken a day off, planning to sleep in and maybe take his car for a long drive later. The pounding came again, more aggressive this time. Derek threw on a shirt and stumbled to the door, still half asleep. He looked through the peephole and saw Linda standing there, her face red and her arms crossed tightly over her chest. He'd seen her around the complex before, knew she was the HOA president from the newsletters that showed up in his mailbox every month. He opened the door. "Good morning. Can I help you?" "We need to talk about that car," Linda said, not bothering with pleasantries. Her voice was sharp, accusatory. "Right now," Derek blinked, confused. "My car? Is there a problem with where I parked it?" "A problem?" Linda let out a harsh laugh. "Oh, there's definitely a problem. Where did you get it?" "I bought it," Derek said slowly, his confusion growing. "From a dealership. Is this about a parking violation or something?" "I want to know where you really got the money for a car like that," Linda pressed, taking a step closer. "Because something doesn't add up here. I've lived in this community for 15 years, and I know when something's not right." Derek felt a flash of anger but kept his voice calm. "With all due respect, that's really not your business. I work hard, I pay my HOA fees on time, and I haven't broken any community rules. Haven't you?" Linda pulled out her phone and started scrolling. Section 7, Paragraph 3 of the HOA bylaws states that vehicles must be appropriate to the character of the community. A car like that attracts attention. It's flashy. It's not what we're about here. "It's a car," Derek said, his patience wearing thin. "A nice car that I legally own and have every right to park in my assigned spot. Now, if you'll excuse me, it's my day off and I'd like to get back to it." "I'm calling an emergency board meeting," Linda announced, her jaw set. "This isn't over. And until we figure this out, I strongly suggest you park that vehicle somewhere else." "That's not happening," Derek said firmly. "Have a good day." He closed the door, his heart racing with frustration. Through the peephole, he watched Linda stand there for a moment before storming off. Derek leaned against the door and took a deep breath. What just happened? That was just the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, Derek's life became a series of increasingly bizarre confrontations and harassment. He'd find violation notices on his door for things that didn't make sense. "Parking violation, vehicle extends 2 inches beyond designated space." He measured. It didn't. Noise complaint. Loud music at 10 p.m. on Tuesday. He'd been at a client dinner until 11 that night, and had the receipt to prove it. Every morning, there was something new. A notice about his doormat being non-regulation. A complaint that his blinds were the wrong color. A citation for leaving his trash bin out 15 minutes past the pickup time. Derek started documenting everything, taking photos, keeping copies of all the notices with dates and times. But the worst part was Linda herself. She seemed to be everywhere. When Derek left for work in the morning, she was often in the parking lot, phone out, taking pictures of his car. When he came home in the evening, he'd see her watching from her window. She'd started showing up at the pool when he went for a swim, sitting there with her tablet, making notes and staring at him. One evening, Derek was checking his mail when he overheard Linda talking to Mrs. Patterson from Unit 15. "I'm telling you, something's not right," Linda was saying, her voice just loud enough to make sure Derek could hear. "Nobody makes that kind of money legitimately at his age. I've done some research. He's probably running drugs or something worse. We need to be careful. We need to protect our property values." Derek's hands clenched around his mail. He wanted to confront her, to defend himself, but he knew that's exactly what she wanted. He'd dealt with difficult clients before, people who tried to provoke him into reacting. The best strategy was always to stay calm and document everything. He started keeping a detailed log. Date, time, what happened, who witnessed it. He set up a small camera inside his car to record any tampering. He saved every text, every email, every notice Linda left. His sister told him he was being paranoid, but Derek had a feeling this was going to get worse before it got better. He was right. The following Monday, Derek came home from work to find a crowd of neighbors gathered in the parking lot. Linda was in the center, holding what looked like an official meeting. As Derek parked and got out of his car, the conversation stopped. Everyone turned to look at him. "Perfect timing," Linda called out. "We were just discussing the new security measures we're implementing. Given recent concerns about criminal activity in the area." "Criminal activity?" Derek asked, walking over. "What are you talking about? This is one of the safest neighborhoods in the city." "Well, we can't be too careful," Linda said, looking directly at him, "especially when we have residents flashing expensive items that might attract the wrong element." The implication was clear, and Derek felt his face flush with anger and humiliation. Several neighbors looked uncomfortable. A few avoided his eyes, but no one spoke up. No one defended him. "I haven't done anything wrong," Derek said, keeping his voice steady even though his hands were shaking. "And I'd appreciate it if you'd stop making accusations without any evidence." "Oh, I have plenty of evidence," Linda shot back. "I've been watching, taking notes. And trust me, when I'm done investigating, we'll see who's right." Derek wanted to say more, but he knew it was pointless. He nodded once and walked to his unit, feeling dozens of eyes on his back. Inside, he sat down at his kitchen table and opened his laptop. Time to find a lawyer. This had gone way too far, but Linda wasn't done. The next morning, Derek found that someone had left a note on his car. Not an official HOA notice this time. Just a piece of paper under the windshield wiper. "We don't want your kind here. Sell the car and leave before things get ugly." Derek's blood ran cold. He took pictures of the note, the handwriting, everything. Then he checked his car camera footage. At 3 a.m, a figure in a dark hoodie had approached his car, left the note, and walked away. The angle wasn't good enough to identify them, but Derek had a pretty strong suspicion. He filed a police report, but the officer who took the statement seemed skeptical. "Probably just kids," he said. "Unless something actually gets damaged, there's not much we can do." "But this is harassment," Derek protested. "The HOA president has been targeting me for weeks." "Look, man, HOA disputes are civil matters," the officer said. "You need to work it out with them or get a lawyer. We can't get involved unless there's a crime." Derek left the police station feeling defeated but more determined than ever. He called his lawyer the same day, explained everything, and sent over all his documentation. The lawyer listened carefully and then sighed. "You've got a good case for harassment," she said. "But these things take time. In the meantime, keep documenting everything. Don't engage with her directly. And whatever you do, don't lose your temper. If she can make you look like the aggressor, it'll hurt your case." So Derek kept his head down. He went to work, came home, and tried to live his life. But it was exhausting. Always being watched, always waiting for the next violation notice or confrontation. His friends noticed he seemed stressed. His work started to suffer because he couldn't focus. All because of a car and a woman who decided he didn't belong. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. Derek was having dinner with his mom at a restaurant downtown when his phone started blowing up with texts from neighbors. "Police at your place. What's going on? Are you okay?" His heart racing, Derek paid the check and rushed home with his mom following in her car. When he pulled into the complex, there were 2 police cars parked near his building, their lights flashing. A small crowd had gathered, And right in the center of it all was Linda, talking animatedly to two officers. Derek parked and walked over, his stomach in knots. "Officers, I live here. What's going on?" Both cops turned to look at him, their hands instinctively moving toward their belts. "Are you Derek Johnson?" one of them asked. "Yes, that's me." "What's this about?" "We got a call about a disturbance," the officer said. "Ms. Hutchins here says you've been harassing her, threatening her." Derek's mouth fell open. "That's not true. I haven't done anything. She's the one who's been harassing me for weeks." "That's a lie," Linda shouted, her voice shaking. "He's been following me, taking pictures of me, making me feel unsafe in my own home. And I have proof." Everything was spinning out of control, and Derek realized with growing horror that Linda had been planning this all along. Derek stood frozen in the parking lot, his mind racing as he tried to process what was happening. Police lights painted everything in alternating red and blue, and neighbors he'd barely spoken to were watching from doorways and windows. This couldn't be real. "Officers, I promise you I haven't done anything wrong," Derek said, trying to keep his voice calm and steady. "I've been documenting everything because she's the one who's been harassing me." Linda's eyes went wide, and she clutched her chest dramatically. See how he is?" "I'm terrified of him. I've been terrified for weeks." One of the officers, a younger guy with a skeptical expression, held up his hand. "Okay, everyone calm down. Let's sort this out. Ms. Hutchins, you said you have proof?" "Yes, absolutely," Linda said, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. "I have videos, pictures, everything. He's been watching my unit, following me to my car, sitting out here at night just staring at my windows." "That's completely false," Derek said, his frustration building. "I work 12-hour days. I'm barely home. I've never followed her anywhere." "Ma'am, can you show us what you've got?" the older officer asked Linda. Linda's fingers fumbled with her phone before she pulled up a video. Derek watched as she played it for the officers. It showed him walking through the parking lot. Then another clip of him getting his mail. Then one of him sitting in his car. Every clip was shot from a distance, zoomed in, edited together to make it look like he was lurking around watching her building. "None of that shows me doing anything wrong," Derek protested. "That's me going about my normal day. I live here. Of course I'm in the parking lot. Of course I check my mail. But look at the timestamps," Linda said, her voice taking on a triumphant tone. "Always at the same times I'm coming and going. He's tracking my schedule." "Because we probably work similar hours," Derek said, exasperation creeping into his voice. "This is ridiculous. I have my own evidence. I have documentation of weeks of harassment from her." "Oh, he's documented me, all right," Linda cut in. "He's been taking pictures of me, officers, making me feel unsafe. I'm a woman living alone since my husband travels for work. I've been losing sleep over this." The older officer looked at Derek with a hardness in his eyes that made Derek's stomach drop. He'd seen that look before growing up in his old neighborhood. The look that said someone had already made up their mind about who you were. "Sir, do you have this documentation with you?" the officer asked. "It's in my apartment," Derek said, "on my laptop and my phone. I can show you everything right now." "And your car," Linda suddenly added, pointing at the Rolls-Royce. "Officers, I want you to know that car appeared suddenly 2 weeks ago. Nobody knows where he got it. Nobody knows what he really does for work. And just yesterday I saw him taking something out of the trunk in a large black bag late at night. It was my gym bag," Derek said, his voice rising despite his efforts to stay calm. "I went to the gym. This is insane." "Ma'am, are you suggesting there's something illegal in the vehicle?" the younger officer asked Linda. Linda pressed her lips together and looked down, playing the part of someone too afraid to say more. "I'm just saying what I saw. Draw your own conclusions." Derek's heart was pounding now. This wasn't just about harassment anymore. She was trying to get him arrested. "Officers, please. Let me show you my documentation. Let me prove that I'm telling the truth." "Derek," his mom's voice cut through the tension. She'd finally found parking and came hurrying over. "What's going on? Baby, are you okay?" "Ma'am, please step back," the older officer said, moving to block her. "That's my son," Derek's mom said firmly. "Somebody better tell me what's happening right now." "Your son has been harassing this woman," the officer said. "We're investigating." "Harassing?" Derek's mom looked at Linda with disbelief. "Derek wouldn't hurt a fly. He works constantly. He's hardly ever home." "Mrs. Johnson, please," the younger officer said. "We need to sort this out." Linda spoke up again, her voice trembling. There's more. This morning I found scratches all down the side of my Mercedes. Deep scratches like someone took a key to it, and it's parked right next to his car. Derek felt the blood drain from his face. I didn't touch your car. I haven't been near your car. The scratches weren't there yesterday, Linda said, and you were the only one I saw in the parking lot this morning when I left for my yoga class. I was at a breakfast meeting with a client, Derek said quickly. I left at 7. I have receipts, witnesses. He could have done it before he left, Linda said. Officers, I'm scared. I want to press charges. For the harassment, for the property damage, for all of it. I just want to feel safe in my own home again. The older officer looked at his partner and Derek saw something pass between them. A decision being made. Sir, I'm going to need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back. Time seemed to slow down. Derek heard his mom gasp. He heard murmurs from the crowd. He saw Linda's face, and for just a split second he caught something there. Not fear, not distress, satisfaction. You're arresting me? Derek asked, his voice hollow. For what? We're detaining you while we investigate, the officer said. We have allegations of harassment, stalking, and property damage. Turn around, please. This is wrong, Derek said, but he complied. He knew better than to resist. He'd grown up hearing the stories, knowing the statistics. A young black man arguing with police was asking for trouble, no matter how right he was. The cold metal of the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, and Derek felt his world crumbling. Everything he'd worked for, everything he'd achieved, and now he was standing in his own parking lot in handcuffs while his neighbors watched and whispered. This is a mistake, his mom was saying, her voice breaking. My son is a good man. He's not a criminal. Ma'am, please step back, the younger officer repeated. We're just doing our job. Derek was walked toward the police car, past neighbors who couldn't meet his eyes, past the Rolls Royce that had started all of this. As the officer placed a hand on his head to guide him into the back seat, Derek looked back at Linda. She was wiping tears from her face, accepting comfort from Mrs. Patterson, playing her role perfectly. But Derek had seen the truth in that one unguarded moment. This wasn't about fear or safety. This was about power. This was about someone who couldn't stand that he had something she thought he didn't deserve. The car door slammed shut, and Derek sat in the back seat, his hands cuffed behind him, his mind reeling. He thought about all the documentation he had, all the evidence. Would anyone even look at it? Or had Linda already won by making him look like the villain? His mom was standing in the parking lot, her phone pressed to her ear, probably calling his lawyer. Other neighbors were drifting away now that the show was over. The police car started moving, and Derek watched his home, his car, his life get smaller in the rear window. At the police station, Derek was processed like any other suspect. Fingerprints, photos, personal belongings in a plastic bag. The whole time he kept trying to explain. Kept insisting they check the community security cameras, check his phone records, talk to people who actually knew him. You'll get your chance to tell your side, the officer at the desk said, not unkindly. Right now we just need to finish processing you. Derek was put in a holding cell with 2 other men. One was sleeping on the bench, the other was pacing anxiously. Derek sat down, leaned his head back against the cold wall and tried to think. There had to be a way out of this. There had to be security footage that would prove he didn't scratch Linda's car. There had to be witnesses who could confirm his timeline, but doubt crept in. What if Linda had covered her tracks? What if she'd been planning this for longer than he realized? She'd seemed so prepared, so confident. She'd had videos ready, accusations lined up, a whole narrative built. Hours passed. Derek's mom showed up with his lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen who listened to everything with an increasingly angry expression. This is profiling, pure and simple, she said. They arrested you based on nothing but her word. Can we fight it? Derek asked. We're going to do better than fight it, Patricia said. We're going to expose exactly what she did. But I need you to stay calm and trust me. Can you do that? Derek nodded, though calm was the last thing he felt. He felt humiliated, angry, scared. He felt like everything he'd built could come crashing down because one person decided she didn't like him. I want every piece of documentation you have, Patricia continued. Every photo, every video, every notice she left. And I want access to the community security system. If she damaged her own car, there'll be footage. You think she did this to herself? Derek asked. Patricia looked at him seriously. Derek, I've seen this before. People who can't stand to see others succeed, especially when those others don't fit their narrow idea of who deserves success. Yes, I think she did this to herself. And I'm going to prove it. A detective came in then, a tired-looking man in his 50s who introduced himself as Detective Hayes. He sat down across from Derek and opened a folder. "Mr. Johnson, I've been reviewing your case," he said. "And I have some questions." Derek's heart raced. This was it. His chance to tell the truth. "I'll answer anything you want to know." Detective Hayes opened his folder and pulled out several papers, spreading them across the table. Derek sat up straighter, trying to read them upside down. His lawyer, Patricia, leaned in beside him, her eyes sharp and focused. "Mr. Johnson, I want you to walk me through your relationship with Linda Hutchins," the detective said. "Start from the beginning." Derek took a deep breath and began. He told the detective everything. The day he bought the Rolls-Royce, the morning Linda pounded on his door. Every violation notice, every confrontation, every time he felt watched and harassed. Patricia occasionally interrupted to add legal context or clarify a point, but mostly she let Derek speak. The detective listened, taking notes, his expression neutral. When Derek finished, Hayes sat back in his chair and studied him for a long moment. "That's quite a story," he said finally. "It's the truth," Derek said firmly, "and I can prove all of it. I have documentation, timestamps, witnesses." "Speaking of witnesses," Detective Hayes said, "I've been doing some digging, called a few of your neighbors. Interesting conversations." Derek's heart leaped. "What did they say?" "Most of them were reluctant to talk at first. Scared of the HOA president, I guess. But a few opened up. Mrs. Chen in Unit 33 said Linda's been difficult for years. Said she once spent 6 months trying to get Mrs. Chen's daughter's boyfriend banned from the property because he had tattoos. Claimed he was gang-affiliated." Patricia made a note on her legal pad. Derek felt a flicker of hope. "Then there's the Kowalski family in Unit 19, the detective continued. They said Linda tried to have their teenage son arrested last year for supposedly stealing packages. Turned out the packages were just delivered to the wrong address. But she'd already called us, made a big scene, accused the kid of being a thief. She has a pattern," Patricia said, "of targeting people she deems undesirable." "Seems that way," Detective Hayes agreed. He pulled out another paper. "I also pulled your records, Mr. Johnson. Clean. Not even a parking ticket. You've been running a legitimate business for 6 years, paying taxes, everything by the book. Your clients speak highly of you. So why am I here?" Derek asked, frustration creeping into his voice. "Why was I arrested based on nothing but her accusations?" The detective sighed. "Because she was convincing. She had those videos, she was crying, and she made a specific allegation about property damage. In the moment, my officers made a call. Maybe not the right call, but I understand why they made it." "What about the security cameras?" Patricia pressed. "The community has them. They should show whether Derek was anywhere near her car this morning." "That's where things get interesting," Detective Hayes said, and Derek saw the hint of a smile. "I'm glad you mentioned the cameras because I was just about to get to that." He pulled out his phone and turned it to face them. On the screen was a paused video feed, black and white, showing the parking lot. Derek recognized the angle. It was from the camera mounted near the entrance to his building. "This is from this morning," the detective said. "Around 6:45 a.m. Watch carefully." He pressed play. Derek watched the grainy footage as a figure approached Linda's Mercedes. The person looked around, then knelt beside the car. Their hand moved along the side panel in a deliberate motion. Once, twice, 3 times. "That's not me," Derek said immediately. "I was already gone by then." "I know," Detective Hayes said. "Keep watching." The figure stood up and looked around again. Then they pulled back their hood, and even in the poor quality video, Derek could make out the face clearly. It was Linda. Derek's mouth fell open. Patricia leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "She vandalized her own car." "Sure looks that way," the detective said. "And it gets better. Or worse, depending on your perspective." He swiped to another video. "This is from 3 nights ago. 2 a.m. The new footage showed Linda approaching Derek's Rolls-Royce. She stood beside it for several minutes, looking at it from different angles. Then she tried the door handle. When it didn't open, she cupped her hands against the window and peered inside. After a few more minutes, she walked away. "She's been stalking his car," Patricia said. "This is evidence of her obsession, not his." "There's more," Detective Hayes said. "I went back through 2 weeks of footage. Every instance she claimed he was following her, stalking her, watching her place. The timestamps don't match. In several cases, he wasn't even home. And the clips she showed my officers? Selectively edited. Derek felt emotions flooding through him all at once. Relief that the truth was coming out. Anger at what Linda had put him through. Vindication that he wasn't crazy. That his documentation and instincts had been right all along. So what happens now? He asked. Now? Detective Hayes closed his folder. Now you're free to go. I'm dropping all charges. And Ms. Hutchins is going to have some very serious questions to answer. We're pressing charges, Patricia said immediately, filing a false police report. Evidence tampering, harassment, stalking. I want the book thrown at her. We'll be investigating all of that, the detective assured them. Mr. Johnson, I apologize for what you went through. My officers should have been more thorough before making an arrest. Derek nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The relief was overwhelming, but so was the anger. He'd been handcuffed in front of his neighbors, treated like a criminal, all because Linda couldn't stand to see him succeed. There's one more thing, Detective Hayes said as he stood. I found something else when I was reviewing the footage. From about a week ago. He pulled up another video on his phone. This one showed Linda approaching Derek's car late at night, holding something in her hand. She looked around nervously, then tried to open the door. When it didn't budge, she tried the trunk, also locked. She stood there for a moment, clearly frustrated, then walked away, still holding whatever was in her hand. What was she carrying? Derek asked. We're going to find out, the detective said. I'm getting a warrant to search her unit. Based on her behavior and her false allegations, I have probable cause. 2 hours later, Derek walked out of the police station a free man. His mom threw her arms around him, crying with relief. Patricia shook his hand and promised to start filing paperwork immediately. We're going to sue, she said. The HOA, Linda personally, everyone who played a part in this. You were falsely arrested, defamed, harassed. This is going to be significant. Derek nodded, but all he wanted was to go home, take a shower, and try to process everything that had happened. The drive back to Riverside Meadows felt surreal. Just hours ago, he'd been in handcuffs in the back of a police car. Now he was pulling into his parking spot free and clear. But the community felt different now, contaminated by what had happened. Derek could see neighbors peeking through curtains as he got out of his car. He wondered what they were thinking now. Did they know the truth? Did they care? As he walked to his unit, old Mr. Peterson from Unit 11 stopped him. Derek, I heard what happened. I'm sorry. I should have spoken up sooner. Linda's been out of control for years, but everyone's afraid to challenge her. Why? Derek asked. Mr. Peterson shrugged sadly. She finds ways to make life difficult. Violations, fines, harassment. It's easier to keep your head down. But what she did to you was wrong. Really wrong. If you need anyone to testify or make a statement, you let me know. Thank you, Derek said, surprised and touched. That means a lot. Inside his apartment, Derek finally let himself break down. The stress of the past few weeks, the humiliation of the arrest, all of it came crashing down. He sat on his couch and let the tears come. His mom made him tea and sat beside him, not saying anything, just being there. His phone buzzed constantly. Texts from neighbors apologizing, expressing support, asking if he was okay. Some people he'd never even spoken to before were reaching out. It seemed like the arrest had woken everyone up to what Linda had been doing. That evening, Detective Hayes called. We executed the warrant on Ms. Hutchins' apartment, he said. You're going to want to hear this. Derek put the phone on speaker so his mom and Patricia, who'd stayed to help with paperwork, could hear. We found a journal, the detective continued. Pages and pages documenting you. Your schedule, where you go, what time you leave and come home. Photos of your car from every angle. And we found a bag of marijuana in her nightstand. Derek's blood ran cold. The black bag. She was going to plant it in my car. That's our theory, Detective Hayes confirmed. We're testing it for her fingerprints now. If they match, that's evidence tampering, attempted false imprisonment, a whole list of charges. This is better than I hoped, Patricia said. Derek, this journal and the drugs. This shows premeditation. This shows a clear attempt to frame you. There's more, the detective added. We found similar documentation on 2 other residents. The Kowalski family I mentioned earlier, and a man named Trevor Williams who moved out 6 months ago. Looks like you weren't her first target, Mr. Johnson. You were just the one she went furthest with. After the call ended, Derek sat in silence. He thought about Trevor Williams, wondered what Linda had put him through. wondered how many people had suffered because of her obsession with control and her prejudices. "She's going to jail," Patricia said confidently. Between the false report, the evidence tampering, the stalking, the attempted planting of drugs, she's looking at serious time. "Good," Derek said quietly. He wasn't Yusu. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Derek watched as his nightmare transformed into something he never expected, a community reckoning. The morning after Derek's release, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. Not at Linda's insistence this time, but because the other board members finally found the courage to act. Derek received an official email invitation, along with an apology for the misunderstanding. Patricia advised him to attend, and Derek agreed, though his stomach churned at the thought of facing everyone again. The community center was packed. Every seat was filled, and people lined the walls. Derek arrived with his mom and Patricia, and the room went quiet. Then, to his surprise, Mr. Peterson started clapping. Slowly, others joined in. Not everyone, but enough that Derek felt tears prick his eyes. These people had watched him get arrested, and now they were applauding him. Linda wasn't there. She'd been formally arrested 2 days after Derek's release, charged with filing a false police report, evidence tampering, stalking, and attempted evidence planting. She'd made bail but was under house arrest with an ankle monitor, forbidden from contacting Derek or coming within 500 feet of him. The board vice president, a nervous man named Greg, called the meeting to order. "We're here to address the recent events involving former board president Linda Hutchins and resident Derek Johnson," he began, his voice shaking slightly. "First, I want to apologize on behalf of the board. We failed in our duty to protect all residents equally." Patricia leaned over and whispered, "They're terrified you're going to sue them." "Which you are," Greg continued. "We're opening the floor to any residents who have experienced similar harassment or discrimination from Ms. Hutchins or anyone else on the board." What happened next shocked everyone. One by one, residents stood up to share their stories. Mrs. Chen told about the 6-month campaign against her daughter's boyfriend. The Kowalski family detailed how Linda had tried to have their son arrested. A young couple talked about being denied pool access because their music was too urban and nicher. Elderly Hispanic man described years of violations for inappropriate holiday decorations, while white neighbors with similar decorations were never cited. The stories went on for over an hour. Derek listened, his anger growing with each testimony. Linda hadn't just targeted him. She'd created an atmosphere of fear and discrimination that had poisoned the entire community. Trevor Williams showed up, the man whose documentation had been found in Linda's apartment. He'd moved out 6 months earlier after Linda had made his life unbearable, constantly accusing him of everything from noise violations to theft. "She drove me out of my home," Trevor said, his voice breaking. "I couldn't take it anymore. I was having panic attacks every time I came home." After everyone had spoken, Greg announced that the board was voting to permanently remove Linda from any HOA leadership positions. The vote was unanimous. He also announced they'd be implementing new oversight policies and creating an anonymous complaint system to prevent future abuse of power. "It's not enough," Patricia said quietly to Derek, "but it's a start." Outside after the meeting, Derek was approached by several residents who apologized for not speaking up sooner. Some offered to be witnesses in his lawsuit. Others just wanted to shake his hand and thank him for standing up. "You did what we couldn't," Mrs. Chen said, tears in her eyes. "You didn't let her win." But Derek knew he hadn't done it alone. If it weren't for Detective Hayes actually looking at the evidence, if it weren't for the security cameras, if it weren't for his lawyer and his documentation, Linda would have won. She would have destroyed him and no one would have stopped her. The legal proceedings moved forward. Patricia filed a civil lawsuit against both Linda and the HOA for harassment, discrimination, emotional distress, and negligent supervision. The case was strong, backed by mountains of evidence, witness testimony, and Linda's own journal entries. Linda's criminal trial came first. Derek attended every day, sitting in the courtroom and watching as the prosecution laid out exactly what she'd done. The security footage was played. The journal was entered into evidence. Expert witnesses testified about the psychological profile of someone who would go to such lengths. Linda's defense tried to paint her as a concerned neighbor who'd made some mistakes but had good intentions. The jury didn't buy it. After 3 days of deliberation, they found her guilty on all counts. The judge, a stern woman who'd clearly been appalled by the evidence, sentenced Linda to 2 years in prison, with 3 years of probation afterward. This was a calculated attempt to destroy an innocent man's life, the judge said. You abused your position of authority, you filed false reports with law enforcement, and you attempted to plant evidence that could have sent Mr. Johnson to prison. This court will not tolerate such behavior. Derek felt a weight lift from his chest as the sentence was read. It wasn't about revenge, it was about accountability. Linda would face consequences for what she'd done, and maybe that would deter others from similar behavior. The civil case settled out of court. The HOA's insurance company, faced with overwhelming evidence and terrible publicity, agreed to pay Derek $175,000. Linda, who'd already lost her job and faced financial ruin from legal fees, was personally liable for an additional amount that would be garnished from any future earnings. Patricia took her cut, and Derek looked at what remained. It was more money than he'd expected, but it couldn't undo the trauma of what he'd experienced. Still, he knew he wanted to do something meaningful with it. That's when the idea came to him. He called Trevor Williams and asked to meet for coffee. The two men sat in a quiet cafe and talked for hours about their experiences, about the systemic problems in HOAs, about how people with prejudices could weaponize rules and regulations. Someone should help people going through this, Trevor said. Someone should have helped us before it got so bad. What if we did that? Derek asked. What if we created a fund to help people facing HOA discrimination? Legal fees, documentation services, advocacy? Trevor's eyes lit up. The HOA Justice Fund. Over the next month, Derek and Trevor worked together to set it up. They put $50,000 of Derek's settlement into the initial fund. They recruited Patricia and 2 other civil rights lawyers to volunteer their time. They created a website where people could submit their stories and request help. The response was overwhelming. Within the first week, they received over 200 requests from across the country. Stories of discrimination, harassment, abuse of power, people who felt trapped and powerless against HOA boards that targeted them for their race, religion, sexual orientation, or simply because they didn't fit someone's narrow idea of who belonged. The fund couldn't help everyone, but they helped as many as they could. They provided legal consultations, connected people with lawyers, helped them document harassment, and advocated for policy changes at the state level. Derek's story went viral on social media. News outlets picked it up. He did interviews, told his story over and over, hoping it would help others realize they weren't alone. The hashtag #JerryChoAccountability started trending, with thousands of people sharing their own experiences. 6 months after his arrest, Derek was invited to speak at a community organizing conference. He stood on stage in front of hundreds of people and told his story. Not just the arrest, but everything that led up to it, the harassment, the fear, the feeling of being powerless. I'm not going to pretend I'm not still angry, Derek said. What happened to me was wrong on every level. But anger without action is just noise. We have to do better. Communities have to do better. And when we see injustice happening to our neighbors, we have to speak up even when it's scary. The audience gave him a standing ovation. Afterward, dozens of people approached him, thanking him, asking for advice, sharing their own stories. Derek realized that his nightmare had become a platform to help others, and that meant something. Back at Riverside Meadows, things had changed. The new HOA board implemented sweeping reforms, anonymous complaint system, regular board elections, strict limits on presidential authority, mandatory anti-discrimination training for all board members. The community even held a diversity and inclusion workshop that most residents attended. Derek was asked to join the new board. He declined at first, not wanting to relive the trauma. But Mr. Peterson and several other neighbors convinced him that his voice mattered, that his experience could prevent future abuse. So Derek ran for board president and won by a landslide. His first act was to revise the community bylaws, removing vague language that could be weaponized against residents. His second was to create a resident advocacy position, someone whose job was to help people navigate disputes and ensure fair treatment. One evening, almost a year after everything happened, Derek sat in his apartment with his mom, looking through photos on his phone. There was a picture of his Rolls-Royce from that first day gleaming in the sun. There were photos from the HOA Justice Fund launch, pictures from speaking engagements, news interviews, community meetings. "Are you glad you kept the car?" his mom asked. Derek looked out the window at his Rolls-Royce parked in its usual spot. He thought about selling it after everything that happened, thought it might be easier to just get something less flashy, less likely to